He was dying, and nobody in that restaurant knew it but her. The grand ballroom of the Harrington Hotel in Washington, D.C. shimmered under 1,000 crystal lights. Laughter floated. Champagne flowed. And somewhere in the middle of all that glittering noise, a man, the most powerful and feared man in the entire room, was quietly, invisibly falling apart. Delilah Monroe noticed it before anyone else. She always noticed things others missed. It came with the job. 6 years of carrying plates, reading faces, and staying invisible had made her sharp in ways no one ever expected. She was refilling water glasses at table 12 when she saw him. James Calloway, seated at the center table like a king at his throne. Dark suit, strong jaw, eyes that didn't smile even when his mouth did. She'd overheard whispers about him all evening from the other staff. Don't look at him too long. Don't ask questions. Just serve and disappear. So she had. Until now. Because right now, the way his hand tightened around his crystal glass, the way his jaw clenched just slightly too hard, told Delilah something that no one else in this room was paying enough attention to see. He was in trouble. She moved closer, pretending to clear a nearby table. That was when she saw it. The faint rash creeping up the side of his neck. The shallow, controlled way he was breathing, too controlled. Forced, like a man managing something behind locked doors. Then his eyes found hers. Just for a second. Dark, commanding eyes. And in them, buried beneath layers of pride and power, she saw it. Fear. Raw, quiet, desperate fear. He looked away instantly, straightened his back, reached for his glass again with a hand that trembled just enough for her to catch it. Most people would have looked away. Most people would have told themselves it wasn't their business. But Delilah had watched her little brother fight anaphylaxis 3 times before his 10th birthday. She knew exactly what that rash meant. She knew exactly where this was heading. And she knew, with a certainty that felt electric in her chest, that if she did nothing right now, this man would not make it to the end of the night. She set down her tray. She walked toward him, and that single decision, that one quiet, unremarkable step, was the moment her entire life tilted on its axis. If you've ever had a moment where you knew everything was about to change, but walked forward anyway, then you already understand what Delilah felt right now. And if this is your first time here, subscribe and stay close, because this story is only just beginning. Stay with me, because what happened next, no one saw coming. Not even James Calloway himself. James Calloway had survived things that should have killed him. He had walked out of burning buildings. He had stared down men with guns pointed at his chest. He had buried allies and enemies alike with a steady hand and a steady heart. But tonight, sitting in the most elegant room in Washington, D.C., surrounded by senators and socialites and enemies dressed in tuxedos, tonight his own body was the thing trying to destroy him. The shellfish allergy was severe. He'd known it since childhood. He'd been meticulous his entire life about avoiding it. So when the sensation first stirred, a tightening in his throat, a warmth crawling up his neck, his first instinct was disbelief. Then calculation. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone at his own table had ordered it into his food without a trace, without a word, with a smile still on their face. He reached into his jacket pocket. Empty. The EpiPen that was always there, without exception, for 22 years, was gone. He felt it then. Not panic. He refused panic, but a cold, clarifying dread that narrowed the world down to seconds and options. He could stand, make a scene, signal his security, let the entire room see James Calloway brought low by a dinner plate. Or he could sit here and quietly lose. Neither option was acceptable. And then a waitress appeared beside him. Not his usual server. She was younger, with dark eyes that moved too quickly and hands that were already too purposeful for someone just clearing glasses. She leaned in close, closer than service required, and said in a voice so quiet only he could hear it, "I can see what's happening. I have an injector, but you need to tell me right now, yes or no." He looked at her, really looked. In his world, trust was a currency he almost never spent. People approached him for 100 reasons: money, power, favors, fear. No one approached him out of simple human concern. No one. And yet this woman, a waitress he had never seen before in his life, was looking at him with calm, steady eyes that held nothing except the truth. No calculación, no agenda, just clarity. "Yes," he said. It cost him more than she would ever know. She moved with quiet, practiced precision. Within 2 minutes, she had guided him to a private corridor off the main hall and administered the injection with hands that didn't shake once. The relief was not dramatic. It was slow, like a fist opening, airways widening, the edges of the world sharpening back into focus. He sat on a velvet bench in that dim corridor and breathed. For the first time in 20 minutes, he actually breathed. And when he looked up at her, this woman still holding the empty injector, her uniform slightly creased, her expression completely unreadable, he said the only honest thing he could think of, "You just saved my life." She looked at him evenly. "I know," she said. And somehow, the fact that she didn't dress it up, didn't flinch, didn't soften it, didn't ask for anything, was more unsettling to James Calloway than anything else that had happened tonight. But that was only the beginning, because in the hallway behind them, one of his men had just discovered something. And the look on that man's face told James that whoever had poisoned him tonight was still in that room, still smiling, still watching. They were in a black car within 10 minutes. Delilah hadn't planned this. She had planned nothing past the moment of the injection. But James Calloway's head of security, a towering man named David Chun, had appeared at her elbow the second the crisis passed and said with absolute calm, "You're coming with us." It wasn't a request. She understood that immediately. And honestly, she wasn't certain she could have argued even if she'd wanted to. Because as they moved through the Harrington's private exit, she had caught a glimpse of 2 men now standing at the ballroom entrance, scanning the room with the focused stillness of people who were looking for something specific. Looking for her. She hadn't understood it then. She understood it perfectly now, sitting in the back of a car crossing into Virginia as James Calloway, color returning slowly to his face, posture already reassembling itself into something formidable, looked at her with eyes that were no longer desperate. They were calculating, measuring, decided. "They saw you help me," he said quietly. "That makes you a liability to them." "I'm a waitress," she said. "I was doing my job." "You were doing your job on the wrong night, with the wrong man, in front of the wrong people." A pause. "I'm sorry for that. I genuinely am. But it changes your situation whether either of us likes it." She wanted to argue. She had a shift tomorrow morning. She had a younger sister, Naomi, a college sophomore in New Haven, Connecticut, whose tuition payment was due in 4 days. She had a life, small, carefully maintained, not glamorous, but hers. "How long?" she asked. He didn't insult her with false reassurance. "Until my team neutralizes the threat. Days, possibly a week." "And my sister?" He was quiet for exactly 1 second. "She'll be protected, discreetly. You have my word." "Your word," she repeated. She let the silence say what she didn't. He held her gaze. "I understand why that means nothing to you right now. I'll show you instead." The estate 1 hour north of Manhattan was the kind of place that made you forget the rest of the world existed. Iron gates, floodlit stone walls, grounds that went on further than made sense. Delilah stood in the center of a bedroom, 3 times the size of her apartment, and tried to hold onto the thread of herself. James appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later. Changed, composed, his expression carrying something she hadn't seen yet, Not softness, exactly, but something in the direction of it. Your sister received a grocery delivery an hour ago, he said. She also has a security detail she won't notice. Delilah stared at him. She hadn't given him Naomi's address. She hadn't given him anything. You already knew about her, she said slowly. I had your background checked in the car. A pause. I know that feels like an intrusion. It was. I make no apology for the action, only for the necessity. He should have angered her. He did anger her. And yet, the fact that his first instinct before anything else had been to make sure her sister was safe made something in her chest shift in a way she wasn't ready to examine. Stay, he said, not as a prisoner. As someone I owe a debt I intend to repay. She crossed her arms. And if I say no, something moved through his eyes. Not threat, closer to honesty. Then I get you home safely tonight and spend every remaining resource making sure no one touches you or your family. Either way, you're protected, but you're safer here. She looked around the room, at the weight of everything this man's world carried. And then she made the second decision of the night that would change everything. 1 week, she said, and I want to talk to my sister every day. He nodded once. No negociation, no hosetastion. Every day. What she didn't know yet was what his team had just found. What she didn't know yet was that the person who had poisoned him was someone James Calloway had trusted with his life for 11 years. And the moment he found out, everything was going to break open. 3 days passed. Delilah had expected them to feel like captivity. They didn't. James Calloway was not what she had expected either. He was present in a way that powerful men rarely were. He didn't disappear behind closed doors and surface only to issue commands. He worked at the dining room table. He read in the library. He moved through his own home like a man who had decided at some point to actually inhabit it rather than simply own it. On the second morning, she came downstairs at 6 a.m., unable to sleep, restless with worry about Naomi, and found him already there, standing at the kitchen window with a coffee mug, watching the grounds. He didn't acknowledge her immediately. He simply reached for a second mug and filled it without asking. Set on the counter beside him. She picked it up. They stood in silence for a few minutes. Outside, early October light was just beginning to touch the Hudson Valley hills, the kind of morning light that felt honest. Do you ever get tired of it? She asked eventually. Of what? Of everyone being afraid of you. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, sometimes I'm not sure anyone has ever not been afraid of me. She looked at him sideways. I'm not afraid of you. He turned his head slightly. Something moved through his expression, surprised, then quickly contained. I know, he said, and the way he said it, like the words held more weight than 2 syllables should carry, made her look away first. On the third afternoon, she found a box outside her bedroom door. Inside were 3 nursing school preparation books. The exact titles she'd had bookmarked for the past year, annotated in the margins with crisp notes in handwriting she didn't recognize. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, holding the books, feeling something settle in her ribs that she had no name for. She brought them downstairs. He was at his desk. She set them on the corner of it. You went through my search history, she said. He didn't deny it. I was looking for what you needed. That's not the same thing as asking. No, he agreed. It isn't. I'm better at finding than asking. She studied him. 38 years old, built from discipline and control, and a past she was only beginning to understand in fragments. And yet, alone in his own house in a way that had nothing to do with a number of people around him. You could just ask, she said quietly. He met her eyes, held them. Yes, he said. I could have. It was the first time in 3 days of careful, circling conversations that she felt like the armor had actually come down. Just slightly. Just enough. That evening, David knocked on James's study door and entered with an expression that Delilah passing in the hallway, caught clearly before the door swung shut. She had seen that expression before, on doctors delivering news to families in waiting rooms. She stopped walking. She stood in the hallway and waited. What she heard next, a name spoken in James's voice like a wound, told her everything she needed to know, and told her that the next 24 hours were going to change this story entirely. Because the person who had poisoned James Calloway wasn't a rival, wasn't an enemy from the dark edges of his world. It was someone who ate dinner at his table every Sunday, someone who had stood beside him at his mother's funeral, someone he called family. And James had just found out. His name was Marcus, James's cousin, 36 years old, Yale educated, charming in the way that people are charming when they've practiced it so long it becomes automatic. Delilah had met him briefly on day 2. He'd arrived at the estate under the pretense of concern, stayed for an hour, asked careful questions, and left. She'd felt something off about him then. The kind of off that you can't prove and don't trust yourself to mention. She'd said nothing. She wished now she had. The full picture that David laid out was methodical and devastating. Marcus had been feeding information to a rival organization for over a year. Not for ideology, not for justice, for the simple, corrosive reason of wanting more than what he had. He had arranged the poisoning at the Harrington to trigger a power vacuum, and had already positioned himself to step into it. He had also, upon learning that a waitress had saved James and was now at the estate, placed Naomi under surveillance. Not as protection, as leverage. Delilah found out about Naomi at 7 in the evening. James told her himself. He sat across from her in the library and told her the truth plainly. The threat, the surveillance, and the steps already taken to move Naomi somewhere safe. He told her before his own plan was finalized. He told her because he believed she deserved to know. That detail mattered to her more than she could say. Is she safe right now? Delilah asked. Her voice was very controlled. My team reached her 40 minutes ago, James said. She's being moved to a secured residence in Boston, Massachusetts. She doesn't know why. She's been told it's a precaution. She thinks you're fine. She's going to panic when she can't reach me normally. She'll be able to reach you. A secure line. Tonight. He paused. Delilah, I need you to know, this is not something I'm willing to leave unresolved. Marcus made this personal when he put your family in his calculation. She looked at him. He was already somewhere else in his mind. She could see it, the shift from man to architect, mapping the next move. But he was looking at her while he did it, keeping one foot here. With her. She hadn't asked him to. He had chosen to. What are you going to do? She asked. End it. Tonight. Then he said the thing she didn't expect. I'm not asking you to be part of this. I want you to stay here, stay with your sister when she arrives, and let me handle it. She studied him. You're not going to use me as bait. No. Immediate. Firm. Never. The word landed differently than it should have. She felt it land. She pushed past it. Then go, she said. Come back. He rose from his seat. And at the door he paused, hand on the frame, back still turned, and said quietly, I'll come back. He said it like a promise, like a man reminding himself of something important. Delilah sat in the empty library for a long time after he left. She picked up one of the nursing books from the side table. She opened it. She didn't read a single word. He came back at 3 in the morning. She heard the helicopter first, that low, rhythmic cut through the night air, and was already at the window when it touched down on the far end of the grounds. She watched from the darkened room, watched the doors open, watched James step out, jacket gone, moving with the careful deliberateness of a man holding himself together through sheer discipline. David walked beside him. 2 other men followed. Marcus was not among them. She didn't ask about Marcus. Some questions answer themselves. She was in the kitchen when James walked in. He stopped when he saw her, like he hadn't expected her to be awake. like he hadn't expected her to be waiting. "Naomi," she asked first. "Safe. Sleeping. 2 doors down." The tension in Delilah's chest released all at once. A full week's worth of fear unwinding in a single breath. She exhaled, sat down on the kitchen stool. He crossed the room and filled a glass of water and set it on the counter in front of her, the same way she had once set a mug in front of him without asking. She picked it up. He sat across from her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The kitchen was quiet. The estate was quiet. Outside, the first pale suggestion of dawn was beginning somewhere far beyond the tree line. "It's over," she asked. "Yes." "And your organization?" "Stabilized." The alliance Marcus had built collapses without him at the center. She nodded slowly. "So I can go home?" "Yes," he said. And then, after a beat, "If that's what you want." She looked up at him. He was watching her with the particular stillness she had come to understand was not coldness. It was the opposite. It was a man holding very carefully still around something he didn't want to damage. "James," she said. It was the first time she had used his first name. Both of them noticed. He didn't move. "I want to finish my nursing program," she said. "I know that." I want to finish my nursing program," she repeated, quietly but clearly. "And I want to stop disappearing into work because I'm afraid of what happens when I actually want something." He was very still. "I want to know what this is," she said. A gesture between them. Simple. Honest. "I want to not pretend I don't." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. More like recognition. Like a man seeing clearly something he had been deliberately not looking at directly for days. He reached across the counter. Not grabbing. Just an open hand, palm up. A question. She looked at it for a moment. Then she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed, gently like something he was deciding to protect rather than hold. "I have never," he said quietly, "met anyone who walked toward me without something to gain." He paused. "You walked toward me when I was dying, and I had nothing to offer you." "You had your life," she said. That seemed worth something. The ghost of a real smile. Not the practiced one she'd seen in the ballroom, but something that reached his eyes and stayed there. "Stay," he said, not like a command, like a man saying something true for the first time in a very long time. Not for protection, not as a guest. Stay because. He stopped. He wasn't a man who said things like this. She could see him working through it. "Stay because I'd like the chance," he said finally, "to ask before I do things, instead of after." She felt the laugh rise before she could stop it. Real quiet, surprised. He looked at her when she laughed, like it was the most valuable thing he'd seen in years. She was still holding his hand. She didn't let go. Outside, dawn broke over the Hudson Valley in long gold lines. Naomi was sleeping safely down the hall. The threat was gone, and in a quiet kitchen in New York, a waitress and the most feared man in Washington, D.C. sat across from each other as the world started over. Thank you so much for staying until the very end. If this story found you at the right moment, if it kept you here, kept you feeling, write in the comments where you're watching from right now. I genuinely love knowing where these stories travel. Subscribe and hit the bell so you're the first to know when the next chapter drops. This story is far from finished.